This message is brought to you by Apple Pay. Forget your wallet? It's all good because with Apple Pay, you can pay with a simple tap of your iPhone, the wallet you never forget, at millions of places worldwide, including websites, apps, and anywhere you see the contactless symbol. Security is built in with Face ID, so you don't have to worry about your cards getting lost or stolen. And the best part, you still earn the card rewards, points, and cash back you love. So say goodbye to the billfold, add your card to Apple Wallet, and start paying the Apple way. Terms apply.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, the RZA, the Jizza, Jeremy Allen White, Cynthia Nixon, Old Dirty Bastard, and Andy Greenwald!
Whoa, that Portland air is treating you fine. I like that.
What's up, brother? How are you doing?
I'm great. You're in Portland. I'm in LA in a dark room with Kaya. For the first time, I kind of wish I was McAfeeing this pod. Not the fugitive internet security guy, but Pat McAfee.
But standing. You want to be standing and roaming.
Oh, no, I just wanted to wear a really deep armhole tank top. Standing is
and
news.
start multiple beefs with other coworkers. Yeah. Greenwald, today on the podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit about The Bear, which is coming back for its fourth season on Wednesday. The entire season drops on Wednesday evening. And as per usual, Andy and I will be breaking the season up into sections. So we'll do the first 3 episodes, I think, on Thursday. And then the middle chunk the following Monday. And we'll conclude our Bear watch that Thursday before July 4th. It's fantastic to see you. People can reach us at thewatch@spotify.com. They can follow us on Instagram at thewatchpod_. And they can watch us on YouTube at the Ringer-TV YouTube channel or on Spotify where they're hopefully listening to us. The other thing we're going to talk about today is the Emmys, which is kind of always at the forefront of the Bear conversation since it's been very successful and very controversial as it participates in the comedy category and much to the chagrin of super mad comedy writers. But I feel for them. You know what I mean?
But yeah, go on.
Like if I was supposed to be in the point guard competition and I had to go up against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I guess I would be disappointed. But first, some notes from the field for you.
Okay.
You know, I want to hear about the Greenwald weekend experience specifically because the reason I did the Wu-Tang intro is because your boy, went and saw Wu-Tang last night.
But I feel like longtime listeners of the pod know that I also saw them like 3 years ago. So this is not like that out of the ordinary. Like
I think you're overestimating how much people pay attention to what we talk about.
I think that there's definitely a fan or two out there that has like a Carrie Mathison / Charlie Day crazy, grid on the wall, like tracking our movements. Like every day, your movement from the coffee place back to your place. Like there's like a red thread. Like some sweet greens are highlighted. Thanks to our buddy Tyler, I saw the Wu-Tang final chamber tour last night at the Crypt, thecrypto.com. Just feels good saying that. Makes me feel like we live in a really successful country.
Now under new ownership.
Well, not yet, right? The deal hasn't gone through. Maybe the government attorneys will be looking at that too. Shout out Sherry Redstone. We don't know. It was cool though to say hi to RZA in his dressing room, which was also the LA Sparks locker room.
Nice.
And so he was getting ready, listening to Arctic Monkeys, one of his favorite bands, with a giant, like you couldn't remove it from the wall, guide to how to conform your WNBA uniform to league standards, including like your compression tops. So
interesting.
I don't think, considering he mostly had like velour Yankees garb, I don't think he was attempting to conform to those standards, but it was nice to know that the arena was trying to help him along his path.
What era of Arctic Monkeys is RZA's jam? Is it early Sheffield punk stuff, or is it the more?
It was pretty croony. I didn't recognize the track
loungier stuff.
I really like
Last Shadow Puppets kind of thing.
I really like that band, but he was not listening to the Submarine original soundtrack. He was listening to like the last 3 albums, which all essentially are one song in my mind.
Yeah, Yes, it's the tequila song. It's like the one in the tequila ad that keeps getting shown.
No, not that one. Like since then, when they've just been playing piano and he's been crooning.
Oh, okay. So like real late period.
Deep
then.
cuts. Yeah.
Wow.
But it was
good show though.
Good show. So nice to see our old friends. People. One of our most memorable early, beats of our origin story was when we drove to Marlton, New Jersey to buy Wu-Tang Forever on double disc.
Yes.
In 1997. I feel
with
like
your then girlfriend.
What's that?
With your then girlfriend
in the backseat of the Saab.
We were like, shh.
You wait in the car.
No, we didn't do that.
Our time.
But when we were playing it, we were just like, don't chime in.
They looked so like healthy and happy, and that made me very healthy and happy. I did not feel particularly healthy and happy because they took the stage at 9:15 on a Sunday night and had a light show that basically gave me epilepsy. You know, when I won on the way in, I was like, this is fine. On the way out.
Got that lepsy now? Yeah.
But I also appreciated that, like, in a nod to what the arena felt like, as after he finished, I think it was after he finished performing Method Man with mic in hand was smiling to the crowd and he said, if you're white and you say the N-word, you're racist. Don't forget.
How many white people were in the audience?
It was dark.
Yeah.
But not that dark. So it was dark.
Cool. Andy, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Bear coming back. I don't really have a lot of personal anecdotes to share. I've had a lovely time up in here in Portland, but the work goes on. You know, I'm never off the clock. I'm always thinking about shows, the TV landscape, streaming wars. I'm excited for this fourth season. You know, I think the third season, I went back and read some of the reviews from like Vulture, The New Yorker, and I had kind of forgotten about how divisive this show was, or this season, the third season was. You know, whether or not that was a flat out genuine rejection of where the third season went, which was kind of more of the same, I think you could say, or perhaps like stuck in gear for some people. You know, like it was definitely like one of those, the most significant about faces that I've seen in like the critical discourse around a show. Do you recall like the response to the show?
Well, response like in the culture or within our own podosphere? Because
either. I remember that we liked it.
We liked it, but we were not that out of step with the seemingly dominant opinion that it was definitely had a different momentum and pace as the previous two seasons. I don't think there were that many. There weren't as many standout episodes. I mean, one of my favorite things about our coverage of The Bear, if we could toot our own horns here, is that when we were going to do the episode of the year a year and a half ago for 2023, we agreed that it should be an episode of The Bear, and I walked away from that conversation prepping forks, and you walked away prepping fishes.
Yes.
That's how dominant that season of TV was. But the larger takeaway did seem to be that the show was spinning its wheels to a degree. It was digressing in directions that seemed to not jive with what the audience was wanting from the show, like particularly bringing in John Cena as an extra fac, you know, for comic relief. That the main character of the show, Jeremy Allen White's Carmy, seemed to be so stuck in neutral that he had almost receded entirely from the show. People really responded to Carmy's relationship with Molly Gordon's character in the second season, and she sort of haunts this third season like a ghost. Yep. So that was kind of taken from them. I think that we said it so many times it's almost become a cliche, but I feel like we weren't the only ones saying it, that the anecdotal, or not, I don't even know if it's anecdotal. I mean, I think it was said in interviews or said by FX executives publicly that Chris Storer had always told them he had a 3-year plan for the show. And the fact that the third and fourth season were split but basically filmed at the same time gave the impression that there was a lot of filler. So that said, with some time and distance from the season, the highs were still pretty high.
Yeah. Why don't I just kind of like run through some broad strokes of what happened on the third season, just to give listeners a refresher course. It has been a year, and I'm sure people are like, oh, maybe I'll rewatch some of it. Season 3 started with, I would say, a divisive and impressionistic episode called Tomorrow that I happen to love. I loved it. Which was essentially an episode-long cinematic exploration of the show's themes and characters set to a 9 Inch Nails song for the most part. I think there was some other music in there, but I went back and watched Tomorrow a couple weeks ago, and I still really love it. You could place that episode basically anywhere in season 2 or 3, and I think it would still be effective. But as a calling card opening gambit for a season, I thought it was really brave, really interesting, but also I remember asking people if they had seen that episode yet once the season had started.
Yeah.
And it was basically split down the middle of that was incredible. That was mind blowing. There's nothing like this on TV to what the fuck was that?
Or that was a very expensive previously on the Bear reel.
Yes. Yeah. But which is not, that's not, I'm not rejecting that out of hand, even if you tell me that. Like you mentioned, the season featured more characters. So you had Fax, you had Brian Koppelman's computer character having a bigger role. And it also featured a lot of non-actor Chicago food scene and national food scene stalwarts, for lack of a better word. The fictional restaurant Ever, which is where Olivia Colman's Terry character works. And that person obviously has a huge role in Richie and Carmi's life. That becomes like this kind of meeting point for both the fictional and and real life food scene to come together. And there's a lot of, especially in the finale, time devoted to non-professional actors talking about their life working in restaurants. And obviously this was filmed coming out of like an incredibly difficult time for restaurants. It's still an incredibly difficult time for restaurants, but a lot of that anxiety and a lot of the frustrations about post-COVID restaurant life were very evident throughout the season, but especially in those final episodes, which may have been distracting for people who were like, but what about Claire? You know, what about this? Like, is the restaurant going to succeed? It kind of wrapped up the story that had been lurking in the background for the first two seasons between Carmi and David, who is his mentor and tormentor. It's funny that word is basically connected.
Mentor, nice.
Played by Joel McHale. Carmi finally gets his moment to confront him, and it's an incredibly disappointing experience for him, I would say.
It's a little bit like the Cyril Andor showdown.
Yes.
We won't spoil that.
Yeah. And then, some of the highlights of the season included the Ayo Edebiria directed episode Napkins, which centered on Liza Colon-Zayas' Tina character. It was a flashback episode to when she first joined the Beef and she met John Bernthal's Mikey and Eben Moss-Bacharach's Richie. And then, of course, there was Ice Chips, which was the Abby Elliott, Jamie Lee Curtis showcase where Natalie gives birth to her first child with the help of her estranged mother. And that's kind of where we're at. I mean, like, there is a looming uncle, like, wants his money back for the investment in the bear thing.
Yeah.
There is Carmi's relentless desire to constantly be changing and innovating and iterating and never rest on his laurels. But that has now become something much more destructive, where he can't have a set menu and he can't, ever be satisfied. He can't ever enjoy himself and can't have a work-life balance.
Sounds like our Thursday pods.
That's right. And I thought we could talk a little bit about what you were looking for the fourth season.
Also, the looming question at the end of the third season, if I remember correctly, is the review, right? Like,
yes.
The Bear has finally been reviewed. And
he gets the review basically as he's leaving Ever.
Right. After the Ever closing night party.
Yeah.
Well, the after party is happening at
Sid's.
At Sid's apartment. Yeah. What am I looking for? I would like... So, okay, I'll use an analogy ripped from the news headlines of my daughter's Pinterest feed, which is there's a brand new Nintendo Switch out. There's a brand new Mario Kart game, which I'm excited because that's a really fun game. And the innovation this year, from what I understand, I don't have a Switch 2 yet because I think they're sold out in like $800 because of the tariffs, is that you can play the racetracks like you always could, but also you can do free driving mode. And you can drive from Rainbow Road to Koopa Troopa Highway or whatever. Season 3 was a long drive from Rainbow Road to Koopa Troopa Highway. And I would like to have a feeling that the car, aka the show, is back on a track. I love this world. I love this show. I love this cast. And I also love the world that the show is interested in, of restaurants and the value of fine dining versus community and ambiance and all the things that the show actually deals with. So I don't actually have a dog in the fight as to what the show is, quote unquote, about, where it's going. There's no landing place that I have in mind. There is, though, I don't think this is just clutching at straws or clutching at pearls to say, like, you can tell when a show is on a trajectory, when it's locked in. And I would like to have that feeling again. I've not watched any of the fourth season, so I don't know if it has or not, but that's my hope.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that this is a case of a car that's built to be a race car having to go on a road trip because of its success? You know, I mean, because there's a world in which those 10 episodes of The Bear that dropped that first season, what was that, 21, 22?
Well, it's every year. So.
Well, when was the first season? Like
2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 22.
22? That first season is like a perfect little statement.
Yeah.
You know, obviously it ends with like a tremendous amount of emotional pain.
And money in cans.
Yeah, but I feel like what Christopher Storer had to do is essentially like redesign the vehicle mid-race and decide like, well, this is actually built for mileage, not for speed. And a lot of the language of the show is about time. A lot of the thematic stuff is tied back to time. Every second counts. Clocks everywhere.
Yep.
Everybody looking at clocks all the time. And you have that pressure. You're inevitably going to feel like there's a ticking clock on the show, that there's like it's trying to get to some place. But that's not actually what long-running television shows do.
Right.
You know, they have their own tempo, and then they have like these digressions, and they have side characters. So it's been really interesting because Carmy has not necessarily changed that much over the 3 seasons, but everything around him has.
Yeah, and I think psychologically, and I know I've said this at some point in the past season's conversation, like I find that very, very compelling that we are all ultimately our own worst enemies, and we can see the need for change, we can understand it, we can have it shouted in our faces, but until we actually do the hard work, it's never going to happen. Yeah. In life, I find that very compelling and relatable. On a TV show, it can be tougher sledding. I also think that like it is absolutely the crutch of the TV critic or the podcaster to want to draw parallel lines between what's happening in front of the camera and what's happening behind the scenes. But one of the things that I find really compelling about TV in the way that it takes over the lives of not just the fans, but also the people who make it, is that you can draw those lines sometimes quite legitimately. And I think that one of the challenges in the world of fine dining, and I think chefs will say this, is how do you, when you can do anything, meaning you have reached the pinnacle, you have your own, you have the backers, financial planning, you have the access to all the best ingredients, and it's an unlimited toolbox. How do you self-edit? How do you express yourself? How do you explain the reason why you're doing this when you could, in that moment, do absolutely anything and people might check it out? We were talking about Top Chef the other week, and like sometimes those chefs do better the crazier the restrictions are, because they are just forced into a spot where they have to consider their options and consider the limits of that. So The Bear, you could make the case that The Bear, the TV show, was more compelling and more itself when it was hungrier, when it was grittier, when it was scrappier, when it was an underdog, when these people weren't stars, when it wasn't FX's number one priority, both to get it on the air for ratings, but also for awards. Story-wise, the challenge of the 4th season is Carmy deciding what he actually wants to do, right? To potentially, in the best case, combine the 2 strands of his personality, the fine dining of his dreams and nightmares, and then also the beloved sandwich shop out back. I will be the most on board with the show, and I will be on the front lines, psychoanalyzing it, if the show does that. Like if in its 4th season, it is able to merge the streams of fine dining and fast casual. Like in terms of episode to episode, this is a fun hang with this group of people. This is a TV show, man, and we love it, with the more ambitious flights of cinematic fancy that Chris likes to do.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's still among, if not the best made or best looking show on TV. You know, coming out of the restrictions and I think budgetary limits, and also like just the sheer speed with which they shoot and with which they like assemble these seasons, which is an increasingly rare occurrence for something to be like, yep, we go again. We shoot in the winter and then we get this thing up in the spring or in the summer. That's really impressive in and of itself. But on a episode to episode basis, like nothing is as well lit, shot, edited, scored. It just is a pleasure for me to watch. Yep. It's funny to hear you talk about like doing that work on yourself and knowing, you can know what you need and you can know what's wrong, but can you change it? And I think that the question I have going into this fourth season is it possible to do that yourself? Or do you need something external to come along to change your circumstances for you to change? Because one of the things that I love about this show is how accurately it portrays the way a group of people who work together can love one another in a very specific way. Because you're not actually friends in the traditional sense that you choose to spend extra time with this person. You're working with them. You're all being paid to do something. You've all got ambitions and you've all got your lives happening outside of work that are influencing like where you are. But I think that The Bear does a really great job showing like Carm and Sydney don't hang out. You know what I mean? It's really funny because I think the internet can only be the internet. And it's like, when are Carm and Sydney, they are endgame. Like when will it happen? And it's like, no, these people are professional. I would almost go like they are weirdly like they are lovers in so much as like they work together in a certain way. Yeah. But they are not like hanging out, going to dive bars afterwards, getting beers and talking about the Cubs.
By the way, I think what you just said is exactly right. I think it's beautifully stated. And if people still need more evidence of what Chris is talking about, watch Chris on Higher Learning with Van from last week, because you have just described that dynamic perfectly. One of the all-time best performances on a Ringer podcast by both of you. Bravo.
Thanks,
And when you guys go to a dive bar together, call me.
Yeah, I will. And you'll be like, I'm sleepy.
I'm tired. I went to Wu-Tang 6 weeks ago. Still catching up on my Z's. Yeah, I think when you talk about like the work hang, the good hang, let's remember one other thing because I don't want my impression of this season or my experience of this season, and I don't want the coverage of it to be overly influenced by the coverage of last season and the Emmy stuff, which actually leads into our next segment.
Yeah.
What I'd like to say though, first, and I feel like has almost gotten lost, is every time I say, "Oh, it's not a traditional TV show. This is like a Michael Mann sizzle reel for a week, and then it's something else." The Bear is a TV show because it fucking delivers 10 episodes every year in June. That is what a restaurant needs to do to meet its margins. You know what I mean? You open and you serve people. And I don't even think we are over-celebrating the emergence of the Pit. I don't think the Emmys are about to over-celebrate. I think the Pit is incredible. But when as we've pivoted to this conversation about how it seems like everybody remembers one of the key things about television is dependability and schedule and its presence on a consistent basis in your home, the Bear was the first to remember that.
Yeah.
In a major way. Not the first, because, like What We Do in the Shadows came back every year too. But in terms of like the relationship to the characters and the dynamic serialized nature of it, the Bear has delivered on that. And so
I think that there's
is a little
like
bit
a
of a
misnomer around the biggest shows in terms of maybe not necessarily ratings, because what are ratings anymore, but in terms of the most hotly discussed shows, right. I think that there's this strange expectation that because they are these acts of staggering genius, they take many years to assemble and bring back to us. Uh-huh. And that was not the case before COVID. It was really not the case before we introduced massive VFX into television shows on a routine basis. And it has kind of just really like invaded the TV space in a way that I think is very bad for TV.
Yes.
I'm the entertainment strategy guy who does a newsletter that's part of like the larger Ankler newsletter business, like wrote something really compelling about these multi-year breaks between seasons are absolutely killing people when it comes to their shows and the interest level in their shows. And I think that like we need way more Bears and Pits and way fewer, not to dump on a show that got canceled, like Wheel of Times or shows that take 2 to 3 years to come back. And you're just like, oh yeah, now I have to relearn what happened on Last of Us, get myself in that headspace. Like, I understand why Last of Us can't come back next year, but it should.
Yeah, and I think it also, to circle back to, I agree with all of that. And I think it's going to be a theme of this podcast for the next few years as the industry tries to remember those things and adjust for it.
We're podcasting for the next few years. That's great.
Oh, well, I mean, my name is going to be on the podcast still. like in perpetuity.
Yeah.
But there will be a success.
Stick the takeoff with Andy Greenwald, yeah.
But
nail the takeoffs.
But
sorry, but
it goes back to it goes back to the chef analogy, right? Of like, that is the fundamental challenge for a lot of restaurants, which is how to be the most creative, expressive version of yourself and then do it consistently every night forever in order to make your impossible.
How many restaurants have you been to or thought about, like, where it's just like that first year, you can't get a table, every night is this memorable night, you can't believe you tried this dish, and then it's like, yeah, man, we can go to Little Dom's. It's okay.
Yeah, like what lasts? Like reliable restaurants. And this was in our Top Chef conversation. It was in my conversation with Gail, which is like, a lot of people who win Top Chef are like, cool, this is great. Now I'm going to, cook at festivals and build my Instagram and just try to make a living that's humane.
And have lots of brand deals. Yeah.
And so there is an element of that in this fourth season where a lot, the cast, the show has created stars in a way that also television historically has done. I mean, Jeremy Allen White was known, but he was not playing Bruce Springsteen in a major motion picture type fame. Io's career is exploding. Eben is the thing, and now is going to be in Avengers Doomsday. Chris is getting tons of movie offers and doing rewrite jobs and stuff. Keeping them within this fold and like them returning and delivering is an open question,
Yeah.
That said, the other open question that, that I think there's people are noticing, there's rumors about, is like, this was, everything we understood, this fourth season was supposed to be or was going to be labeled the final season. Mm-hmm. That verbiage is missing.
We assumed that.
We assumed it.
Because we assumed that this is a 3-season arc that had been stretched to 4 and that this would be the final season. There has been no literature to suggest that so far.
No, which is also amazing because, as I was just saying, like, getting this cast together to do anything, whether it's press or film a season of the show, is like lassoing cats. So I'm interested in that. We're not reporting anything. We're not breaking news. We have not even, at least whatever context we have at FX, we haven't even asked. But I think that's noticeable and it's interesting. And once we get into the episodes themselves, I think until something is confirmed one way or another, like, it's going to be a drumbeat to the conversation. I'm not saying that I will enjoy the first 3 episodes less if I feel the end moving, for the goalposts moving while I'm watching.
Well, I don't know what the goalposts are,
but we don't know.
I think that's probably the advice we should all take is like, don't expect any, like, there is not like a, will Don Draper reveal his true identity? Who will stop Walter White? Like, the Bear, the restaurant will either continue or it won't. The show will either continue or it won't. But there isn't like a anvil hanging over the series anymore to me. Not that there was, but I think it's really hard to imagine them maintaining the emotional intensity of Fish's. Mm-hmm. Or even like the early episodes of like Carmi's incredible like perfectionism and screaming and rocking and rolling all over the place. Like, I don't know how many years you could have done that, but it is tracking the way that these people have changed and evolved. And the restaurant has.
Here's the other thing to keep an eye on. A lot of the show's most successful drama, and certainly its most enduring trauma, has been about the characters wrestling with their pasts. And a lot of the show... That's
exactly... what Catherine Van Arendonk made that point about season 3. She was probably lower on the season than you and I were. But she mentioned how much of the best of the Bear is happening in the past.
Yeah, exactly. Or the shadow of the past. Or the past showing up for friends and family night and wanting a seat at the table. Fixing old wounds. And that's true for every character. I mean, Sydney's relationship with her father isn't damaged. It's sweet. But it hangs over everything that she does in the present. I think a successful season for me would bring the characters up to the present moment and see, and not that, look, again, use the real life psychological lens, like, all of us are always in conversation with our past and what was modeled for us and what we're carrying.
Especially the older
we can't let go of, for sure. Yeah. But I do think it would be the sign of a healthy healthy comedy, if the show's stresses, problems, stakes were more aggressively rooted in the present. The review, can they hold this together? Future relationships, including like, I didn't read Catherine's piece, but I wonder if this came up in it as well. The Molly Gordon character was a present problem / gift to Carmy, but the show pushed her into the past and made her another past problem, another ghost haunting him in season 3. So, and I think that thinking this through out loud in real time, but I feel like that sensibility also was a anchor weighing down season 3. When we talk about lack of momentum, it's not entirely that it wasn't just getting to the point of the restaurant opening or getting reviewed or whatever. It was also that more and more things kept accruing in the past ledger rather than moving it forward.
I guess I find that pretty accurate to life, but I don't know whether or not that's great for TV. I find that if you get to a place in middle age or, just maybe in terms of professional stability and your day to day is more or less functional and you're not like, how am I going to get to the piece of pizza that will be my sustenance at 7 p.m., which is where I was maybe 20 years ago. I think that you start to think about your past way more because you're like, what made me into this person?
And it was all that pizza you ate.
And you also have a lot of time, like you kind of have a lot of like, mental downtime, especially if you don't like have a kid, you know what I mean? Like I imagine for you though, when you see your kids, you're thinking about like your parents, right? Like you're thinking about how you were raised versus how you're raising your kids.
Yeah. And then
not to get personal.
No, but it's all true. And also the challenge of like, it's a challenge to be present with children as the completely unique people they are when your brain keeps wanting to pull you back into childhood and be like, project your own, well, I didn't like doing this, so they won't like it. So how do I protect them from it as opposed to letting them have their own
You just let them listen to Wu-Tang.
Experiences.
It's just the only way.
Again and again. The other thing I'll say, then we can move on, is just I always have time for this show. And not just because I loved the first 2 seasons, but the ways that I felt season 3 dipped or lost me or confounded me, there is in terms of what I look for in the art that I enjoy consuming, there is a level of like good faith interest in the emotional lives of characters. And The Bear never went away from that. Sometimes it went too far into it, but I am always interested in the digressions. I don't feel, because, you've been podcasting with me and been friends with me for a long time. Sometimes I have a very visceral reaction to things that I don't like or that aren't working for me. And The Bear never pushes me in that way because...
Even when you're like, this isn't working for me.
Yeah, because it doesn't ever, at least to my, from my perspective, it never does it in a way that is cynical or that is heavy. Well, it is heavy-handed. It can be heavy. But it's never cynical and it's never for show.
Yeah.
It's not, it's always sort of rubbing the worry stone of who we are and are we okay and what are we doing and not throwing extra things at it. Maybe other than John Cena, which I still don't fully believe. But the other thing that underlines the history of the show when they get together to film is it does seem like a pretty fun, loose family affair that isn't afraid of doing stuff that it wants to do.
If it wasn't a pleasure to make, I don't think they would make it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's right.
The one thing I wanted to ask you about before we get into our fake Emmy categories conversation was the release of the show, which has been something that you and I have kind of, I think, been mad at since even the beginning. Although I think it really served the show well in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, you and I have probably been like, why the hell do you wait a year only to have this like one night of watching The Bear, basically? And we have enforced our own limits on the last couple of seasons of how we talk about it. Often we talk about like seasons of shows. Usually they're limited series that are constructed as like long movies with a little bit of derision. Like you didn't do the work necessary to make this a compelling piece of television week to week. And now we've kind of come into this new era where, what Tony Gilroy did with Andor, which was presenting these 3 act arcs of different stories. I went back and watched some chunks of the first 3 seasons of the show. And I have to tell you, I do think it works better as a binge because I, first of all, found myself unable to stop. So I would just watch 2 or 3 episodes of a season just without even thinking, hitting next episode. But I think when you finally get yourself into the headspace to be, okay, this is the cutting rhythm, this is the shooting style, this is the music, this is the performance style. It's hard hard to jump out after 31 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is generally around what these episodes run at, with the exception of some really extended, almost like feature length pieces.
And I think this isn't a spoiler, like the runtimes of this season was released somehow, and that's out there. And it basically every episode is 32, 33 minutes except for one whopper, 169-minute episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, they are committed to the bit, and I respect it.
But I think we thought maybe, this is like a database decision that doesn't work for the show. And I kind of now am starting to feel otherwise.
I'm interested in that because I think database, like these companies are going to do what works best for them. And there's unquestionable proof that we do not have access to that this is a blockbuster for the Disney Corporation in the way that they release it. So that was never going to change. As a consumer and viewer, and we talked about this last month, Andor had, especially the season 2 release, had a lot of thought put into it. Andor is an extremely dense and chewy show, and more than 3 episodes, I think, would have been completely unwieldy. But the 3 episodes being essentially mini movies and being there being some intentionality to what we're given when we're given it, I really came around and liked a lot. I'll try and pay attention as I get into this season, whether I want to stop at our artificially decided upon stopping places. But I guess the thing is I'd love to see the experiment run. I would love to know what the reception to and engagement with a week
2.5 months of The Bear.
I'm really curious about that. Especially, but we're not getting that. So do you feel like that is unique to The Bear, your desire to just keep going, or are there other shows recently?
I misspoke. It is pretty unique to The Bear. I don't have a lot of shows where I'm like, next one. The exception really would be also mysteries, because Netflix ones, especially like Department Q, are so good at putting, you want to click next.
Department Q was well crafted for that, and I was just also into it. Do you know what I've actually really appreciated in the last month? 5-episode seasons. Now, look, we just came off of talking about The Pit, and I'm like, 15, hell yeah. Like, let's go. That's, multiple months of enjoying something week to week. But both 100-Foot Wave and Sirens are 5 episodes. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not here to comment on like the amortization value of doing that for some of these networks. Everything is different. But there was something psychologically quite comforting knowing that this was manageable.
Yeah.
Would I like more episodes of 100-Foot Wave? Sure. But 5 was hitting me different than 8, I gotta say.
Is this a precursor to a new Emmy category? Where like that's achievement for a perfect number of episodes?
That's such a good idea. It's a good segue because...
and it goes to like a data guy at Netflix who's like, yes.
Exactly.
I nailed the amount of Sirens episodes to order.
He just shows up blinking, clutching 3 empties of Monster Energy drink. He's just like, gotta go back to my cave.
The real reason Andy and I wanted to do this is, for the Big Picture Pod, like their relationship to the Oscars is so pure, and it's one of the animating discussions of their pod is the award season, the horse race to get to the nominations for the Oscars, what's going to win the Oscars, what should win the Oscars, and the Oscars is this like almost spinal cord of like the year of movies for them. And we don't have that really with the Emmys because we don't really, frankly, I think, not respect or believe in the Emmys, but I find like it complicated to judge something from, the second half of last year and the first half of this year. The categories now have become, I think, a little bit behind the television times. And, mostly what people talk about with the Emmys night, aside from like if something rises and becomes like a kind of preeminent show, which I think we have a chance that could happen coming out of this upcoming season of Emmys, or this upcoming broadcast of the Emmys in September. The nominations will come out in mid-July, but the voting is open now. So that's why Andy and I thought we would chat about this. Is like this really fucking stupid Is the Bear a comedy conversation that has now apparently warranted hit pieces from veteran comedy writers talking about it. And I'm like kind of so bored with this chatter that we decided we would come up with some new categories for the Emmys.
First of all, I'm very happy to turn the page of the conversation from what seems to be solidifying into a two-take race, which is the Bear a comedy and what should win instead of it since other shows are funny, and the Pitt or Severance battle for the soul of what television should look like and how often we should get it.
Right.
I think there are there are a lot more interesting topics to discuss than that. But we haven't compared notes on this. I think this is such a great idea. I think this is so fun. I've come up with 3 categories with nominees, but I kind of just want to keep doing this. I feel like just then, that idea of like best runtime, there's plenty of things to do.
Yeah. I mean, I really wish I guess the Emmys, like a lot of award shows, are kind of like in the weird place that some professional sports leagues are in, where it's like, well, we can't revise what we do too heavily because it would impact the integrity of the history of the experience.
Right.
You know, like we're not going to drop down to 62 games because A, the money, and B, the stats. You know, the stats would all be different. Like records would all be would all go to the side. But you know what? Actually, before we get into this, can I just run to the bathroom?
Of course.
All right. So the reason why we're doing this is just because we think the Emmys could use a fresh coat of paint.
Yeah.
And it could use a little bit of a shakeup in terms of what kind of categories they have, what kind of awards they're giving out. This is not to say that there isn't value in the way that they do things. And it certainly is trying to throw its arms around the awkward television year, which is basically a nonstop 12-month, 7-day a week, 365 days a year schedule. But I do think that these institutions like the Television Academy or the National Basketball Association are a little slow to revise because they think that there's like this overwhelming interest in historical comps and the sort of like the scholarship around like, oh, like this show has this many Emmys, this show has this many Emmy nominations. Mm-hmm. I just think we can move past it. There, like when Mad Men was on the air, there was like 1/10 of the amount of television.
You're doing the eras conversation. I'm
just saying, like, I think TV has changed so drastically and the kinds of shows that are being made has changed so drastically since even the early 2000s that we could actually truly stand to have some new categories beyond the kind of jokey, interesting ones that we're about to throw out.
I agree. And I think that the Emmys are often very, very guilty of hurting. Like if a show wins for best comedy, it often wins.
It goes on a run.
Yeah, the actors win, the writers win, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I historically do like about the Oscars, even though on the face of it doesn't make much sense, is that when there's a large group of Best Picture nominees, there's often like a smaller film or an art house film or a filmmaker favorite included, which is great for everyone involved. But they also have no chance in hell of winning the big prize. What they tend to win then is the screenwriting prize. Like that's like Quentin Tarantino has never won an Emmy for directing, right? He's only won for writing. So I think the Emmys, part of the categories I came up with is for just that. Like there should be a way to share the wealth for shows that are excellent, but maybe not the ones that's going to move the room, move the industry, and sweep the night.
Why don't you go first with your first new category for the Emmys? Okay.
I'm also realizing I in some ways, when I'm looking at my categories, I am sort of turning this into the Grammys or the American Music Awards, but I'll explain why in a second. Okay, so my first category, and we haven't compared notes. Maybe we'll have some overlaps here. Best New Artist slash character. This is going to be confusing because of the 7 nominees I have, some are actors and some are characters. And in my world, that's fine. So, for example, my first nominee for Best New Artist / Character is Akram from Department Q. Alexei Manvolov is a great actor, but I'm giving this award to the character because I want him to be in many more seasons
interesting.
of television.
So this will function as more of a it works within the fictional world of the show rather than like achievements outside.
Well, then also Owen Cooper from Adolescence is nominated, the 15-year-old star. Not Jamie, the actor, because I think he's the best new artist.
How do you determine what, like...
I want to see the screen, like the pictures of the nominees, the picture-in-picture, but the people who are nominated as a character have to dress in character and give their speech in character.
Oh, so Owen Cooper...
Can just be Owen Cooper.
Okay.
He can just be like a humble 15-year-old. But Alexei Manvilov has to get up there pretending to be a guy who used to work in the Syrian Secret Service and speak very politely from notes in a notebook. Also, Sarah Lightfoot Leone, who's an actress who came into our lives this year via The Agency and American Primeval. She is not nominated as, what was the character's name? Abish? She's not Abish. No. She's Sarah. But poor Taylor Dearden has to show up as Dr. King from The Pit.
Okay, I get it.
This
is an interesting idea.
Yeah, we shouldn't have led with this one, but I like it. Similarly,
no, I do.
Stephanie Koenig from The English Teacher has to go as Gwen Sanders. The character of Gwen Sanders is nominated. But Ella Lily Hyland also has to show up as Williams from Black Doves, the 24-year-old Irish assassin.
Okay, but so some people show up as actors.
Yes.
Some people have to show up as characters.
Correct. Lola Pettigrew.
Based on just basically how you associate them?
No, who I want to reward. So, and also some of the characters have reached an ending point. For example, Dolores Price.
Yeah.
A real life figure in the Irish struggle for independence, played by Lola Pettigrew brilliantly in Say Nothing. That is a closed bracketed character on screen and in life. She is no longer with us. But Lola, I think, is a incandescent talent. So Lola is nominated. So the nominees are Akram, Owen Cooper, Sarah Lightfoot Leone, Dr. Mel King, Gwen Sanders, a teacher, Williams, an assassin, and Lola Pettigrew. And I think that would be a lot of fun. Maybe not for the people who have to show up as a character, but I think it would be a lot of fun.
Also, just like, how do you figure this out with a voting block?
I'm not worried about the voters. The voters.
Along those same lines, maybe the inverse of this is one of the issues that's been, I guess, not plaguing television, but it's certainly an interesting change, is the how short the runs are for shows, even successful shows. We already start dialing them down after a couple of seasons because obviously there's like a question that they have to answer, but also typically what happens, if my understanding of television, the business side of it is correct, is after the third season of a show, there are different escalators involved with people's contracts. Often the behind the scenes crew, the below the line crew are expected to get pay raises right after the third season. So it's actually increasingly rare to see shows go beyond 3 seasons for a variety of reasons. But I want to reward excellence in long-running television shows.
Okay, I like this.
And so basically, like, my first one is excellence in extended run. So this would be for more than 3 seasons. So it'd have to be either rewarding a third season that already has a renewal, or something past its. So it could be the last season if it's a 4th season, but it has to be excellence in extended runs. And we are taking into account the totality of the achievement of the show rather than was the 9th season good.
Don't we sound like people trying to explain VAR or something? Like football fan?
A little bit. But I do think that there's something to be said for, say, is this a place where you could reward SVU?
Right. Okay.
You know,
we want to expand the tent.
Yeah. Yes.
All right.
Is this a place where some long-running procedurals could get some love? Where, honestly, there are a bunch of Apple shows that are on like season 4, season 5, where I'm like, damn, I didn't know that this show came back, much less had 5 seasons.
Okay.
And so I think that would be a cool way to kind of celebrate, because like I do think that the Television Academy has started getting a little in love with a show that's on its 2nd or 3rd season.
Yeah,
but
it used to be the Golden Globes would be like, Homeland's been on for 6 weeks. It's the best drama of the year. And that's kind of the function the Golden Globes served, would be the hype man for new stuff, while the Emmys were a little bit more austere.
Yeah, it would just be like Modern Family. You want to get...
But now the Emmys, like the viewing public, honestly, has a very short attention span. And it falls in love quickly.
Okay, what's your next category?
Oh, but do you have any nominees beyond SVU, or you're just saying that's the category?
Well, so here's the issue with this previous year, is that all of our shows from the top 10 of 2024... essentially all of them are either new or within their first 3 seasons. And then all of my shows from this year that I would say are on some sort of magical big board for end of the year best of, and they're not going to be like that surprising to people who've been listening to the show. I mean, there are things like The Pit and Adolescence and, these are the series that like we've been talking about a lot. I would say that the only one that really fits into what we're talking about here would probably be Shoresy.
Right.
But Shoresy will pop up in a couple of other places.
There's one other one. Industry would...
It will be for... It's just not out yet, and it would be for next year, right?
Oh, I see. Yes. Oh, It's not eligible. Even the third season is eligible, but you're not.
Yes.
But it has to be beyond that. I see. Okay. All right.
Although I guess in my telling of this, Industry would be eligible because it has been renewed for a fourth season.
Okay. Here are my nominees for my new category. So I have a new category. It would be called Television Entertainer of the Year, and this award
is this your Mulaney Award?
Yes, but more than just Mulaney. I was thinking about how do we get Mulaney an award because God knows that guy needs more commendations and attention.
Uh-huh.
But more than that, it's actually my Stephen Graham Award.
Oh.
You know, because I was trying to think of something, a way to recognize people who might slip between the cracks of, you know, bigger shows or being affiliated with, they might be affiliated with smaller shows, but many shows. You know what I mean?
Can I make an edit here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I think I really like your Mulaney thing, which is your Entertainer of the Year.
Yeah, but I have 6 other nominees for it, but go on.
But do you think that you're really saying achievement on multiple shows in a Emmy calendar year?
Yes, basically. Yes.
Right.
So
Cynthia Nixon's on And Just Like That in Gilded Age. Stephen Graham is in
Thousand Blows and Adolescence.
And Adolescence, yeah.
Erin Doherty is in Thousand Blows and Adolescence. She's nominated. Steve Carell is in 4 Seasons and Mountainhead, nominated this year. He's very honored. Our guy, hardest working man in the UK, Kurt Eguiwan, is in House of the Dragon, The Agency, and Andor. And like Mulaney for Everybody's Live, his contributions to SNL 50 and all talk shows that he appears on. Conan O'Brien for his appearance on many talk shows, his travel show, Conan Must Go, which I watch regularly and love, and his Mark Twain Prize, which became a show on Netflix. And then the dark horse, bringing it back to the Mulaney show, is my guy Langston Kerman, who is secretly responsible for most of my biggest laughs of this past year.
But is he on screen?
He is on screen. He was in the Bubbles suit in the Mulaney interview with Michael Jackson's Chimp, which is
I really like Langston Kerman a lot, but this category is really doing a lot of work for your interests.
I thought that's what we were doing.
We are, but I actually think you have 2 categories here. You do.
Well, okay. Well, we can bring this up with the Hollywood Foreign Press or whoever is going to vet this. But Langston Kerman was on Mulaney. He had his own comedy special, and he was on English Teacher.
Yes. Is he on Abbott?
I have not kept up with Abbott, so I can't tell you that. I cannot confirm that.
Hold on a second, Kaya.
Is that so? If Langston Kerman was on Abbott this year, do you grant him entry to this category?
Yeah, he's Darnell on Abbott.
Oh, right, of course. Okay, so yes. So don't you think he deserves a spot here?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I thought you were trying to...
He could actually be in both of your fake categories here. He could be Entertainer of the Year.
And Best New Artist.
And Multi-Show Utility Player. Yeah.
Oh, so you think Entertainer of the Year should be someone who is just entertaining?
I think that should be Conan, Mulaney, like your boy Mike Birbiglia. Like you can have like... There should be a comedy.
Oh, you think it's a comedy category? So, like, when every year one supporting player on SNL gets nominated, like Bowen Yang gets nominated, this would give him a chance to win. And you feel like Stephen Graham should not be in this category because you didn't laugh as much during his appearances in Adolescence. Okay, fair, fair. You have another one, or should I go with the last one? What do you got?
Yeah, I have another one here. Scene of the Year.
Oh, this is good. That's really good.
Yeah. I thought that now this would be interesting in the same way that there's what some people would describe as category fraud going on between The Bear and the Hacks with comedy is what happens when an episode is a scene, like the third episode of Adolescence,
a oneer,
right? What happens when a scene is full of incredibly virtuistic filmmaking, like certain aspects of Severance. Like there's multiple scenes in Severance that I think you could put up for this. What happens when or are we talking about like there's scenes in Adults, for instance, which I think would get in under the line for Emmys. Probably won't get any Emmy nominations, but I really enjoyed that season.
Saying it will not, but go on.
Yeah, but like there are scenes in Adults that are like hysterically funny, but I don't know if like would that really work against also the Gorman Massacre in Andor? Like, can you have those things in the same category?
I love this idea because one of the goals of this whole exercise, right, would be to shine light on certain aspects of something that might otherwise get ignored. And like you're pitching me this category, two scenes from Severance, a show that I am famously not the biggest fan of, at least the second season, immediately leapt to the top of the list. Like the opening scene of Adam Scott running through the endless hallways, and the door company's salesman scene. Like,
completely different.
Completely different.
Like,
one is absolute filmmaking and incredible filmmaking and combining VFX and practical. And I've seen some behind the scenes stuff of how they did that, and that is incredible, elite work and absolutely commendable. And the door company scene is just brilliantly shot, brilliantly conceived, funny, disarming, weird, everything I like about the show. And it makes me excited to think that there would be an opportunity in your Emmys to dole out gold even places that I maybe don't otherwise want it to go. I love that.
Thank you, man.
Okay, the last thing, and this is maybe the most Grammys, in that one of the things that the Grammys does that I think every year confuses people, but I do think has value, is Record of the Year and Song of the Year are different categories. So,
it's a producer award and a songwriting award, right?
Yes, and the artist, I think, if the artist is not a songwriter, the artist participates in the glory for Record of the Year, but Song of the Year is a writing award. Okay. And I think that idea of understanding that there are many different kitchens and different cooks responsible for the success of something. And so this is very on brand for the podcast, but what if we did a Showrunner of the Year award? And I think it's tricky because the job is so ill-defined. I mean, it's ill-defined in terms of like pay scale and whether it's a writing or a producing job, and it actually isn't an official title, and I could go on and on about that. But it is...
Finally, will someone think of the showrunners?
Solidarity at this moment in American history. Who deserves our attention more? But that there's also very different ways of successfully running shows. And, I think that it would be an interesting insight into the industry. And it would really be an industry-driven award because only people on this side of the curtain would probably know why to reward someone. So, for example, my first nominee for Showrunner of the Year is Taylor Sheridan, right? Like, I know you're nodding. Some people aren't watching this. They should just hear your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. You say it in your most Taylor Sheridan way.
What's so fascinating about this is that there are so many different kinds of showrunners now, right? So you have guys like Storer, who's directing a bulk of the episodes of the year and is so hands-on responsible for the way a show looks and feels. Then you have showrunners
who are
like
co-showrunner
Tony,
with Joanna Kahlo.
Yeah, but is directing a lot of the episodes. So that's the only reason why I shouted him out.
Yes.
And then you have people like Tony Gilroy who never goes to set.
Yeah, well, also Damon Lindelof famously never goes to set. There are very, very different ways to do it. So I feel like, I picked a couple, I'm going to throw them at you, and I'll explain the reasons why. And I think that these are all things that should be rewarded. Taylor Sheridan is the most prolific writer, producer, showrunner on television right now, and he's responsible for multiple hits. All of them are in the key of Taylor, but there is some variety that he's offering. I would nominate our buddies Mickey Down and Conrad Kay for this award, because they have consistently delivered an excellent show that year over year, to put it in financial terms, has delivered an enormous return. Then there's R. Scott Gemmell, who is the showrunner of The Pit. And I feel like the orchestration of that show to be familiar and bold at the same time, and to do things that require a confidence that is really beyond the ken, I think, of a lot of more contemporary showrunners. And maybe this is dating him in the sense that he did work on ER, but saying, I'm going to give you, in episode 1, I'm going to introduce you to a dozen people, maybe 2 dozen. And by the end of the run, you're going to love them. But I will have to commit to them before there's been any audience feedback to them. And I think that requires, and John Wells, who is the Yoda of showrunners at this point, is the EP on that show as well. It speaks to his bloodline, but I think that's kind of awesome. I put Tony here because Tony's, like many showrunners, took minimal writing credit on season 2 of Andor. I think he's only credited with the first 3 episodes, but of course everything went through his laptop before it went to air. And as he's proved in his media blitz after the release of the show, like none of that really happens without him.
Yeah.
I put Josh Zatumer for Say Nothing.
For sure.
Because I think that show was underseen, underappreciated, not by us, but I think maybe by the general public. I don't know if it's going to get any Emmy love, but the degree of difficulty for that show is almost unimaginable because you are ripping up the still fresh guts of so much generational trauma and pain and making a show that was, I think, respectful and also quite entertaining. I think this is an opportunity for Will Smith of Slow Horses to get recognized for delivering like a consistent level of quality every year that is really remarkable. And then finally, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. The studio is eligible this year. Directing and running the studio. And just so brilliantly communicating both their comedy but also their filmmaking aesthetic throughout an entire show. And by the way, Sal Saperstein was the last man on the nominee list for Best New
I want
character.
Ike Barinholtz to go as Sal Saperstein.
Yes. I think that maybe we should push him in because that would be great. Everyone
I really like that. It's cool too because it gets into the debate of like what are these people contributing to their shows?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it an overall sense of coherence? Is it a filmmaking touch? Is it a aesthetic that goes across multiple series? Like in terms of Taylor Sheridan, I love that.
I was thinking too, like there are other ways to look at it too, and this is and the variety of possibilities is what makes this ultimately impossible because you cannot pin it down, and so it's very hard to judge apples to oranges to mangoes to corn chips. Like it's a very, very wide group of people with wide group of responsibilities. It would be an interesting opportunity to reward people like Joe Barton, who did Black Doves, who is representative of a particular type of incredibly skilled English showrunner who gets a lot of at-bats, but maybe making shorter shows.
Yeah.
So Black Doves, Giri Haji, there was a Papa Esidu drama that we didn't even cover. He made 2 years ago. And that way you kind of can get your arms around someone's whole body of work. What's the name of our guy that we love? Who's
Hugo Blick.
Yeah, Hugo. Like this would be an opportunity when someone has a new show to say like, you are doing something inimitable within the world of TV. And even if one of your shows isn't a home run, you are hitting singles consistently to a way that we would love to celebrate you.
That's really smart. Why don't we wrap it up there? I think we got a couple of really good categories. We're always here to give the Emmy notes. And I think what we could do is we could continue to, brainstorm new ones and drop them on the pod as the year goes on.
I think we should, especially once we get the full list of actual nominees. And then instead of bemoaning the snubs, we can just come up with stuff to reward them in our own world.
Yeah. All right. So Greenwald, we'll be back on Thursday to talk about the first 3 episodes of the new season of The Bear. Hope everybody gets a chance to check those out on Wednesday night. Until then, great to see you. Thank you to Kaya and John.
I hope, Chris, that you spend the time between today and Thursday going to a large number of farm to table, let us explain how our menu works restaurants in the Pacific Northwest in order to just get you in the headspace for it.
Thank you. Greenwald, great to see you as always.